Welcome back. This is the Kelly Roach Show, and I am excited to have Megan Sumrell on the show today. And we are going to be talking about kicking overwhelm to the curb, work-life harmony, and so much more. Welcome to the show. Happy to have you
Thank
here today.
you. I'm thrilled to be here.
I'm so happy you're here because there's one thing that I've been saying to my clients and to our market for the last 2 years.
Yes.
I feel like the default setting of the world is that people are in overwhelm. And
100%.
so it's crazy that it seems that for whatever reason, when we shifted into the post COVID era, people fell into this state of overwhelm and they cannot seem to kick it. And so I'm so happy you're here because I know for a lot of our listeners, they've got families at home, they're managing the house, they've got the kids, they're building and running the business. It's all encompassing and they would love to break out of this feeling, but it just seems like there's so much.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So first of all, before we dig into strategies and solutions and mindsets around that, why don't you talk to everybody just a little bit about like your story and how you even landed in doing this work that you're
Sure.
doing?
Yeah. When I was 8 years old and you asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? This was not, I'm going to do time management and planning.
Right, right.
So I actually spent over 20 years in the corporate IT space.
Hmm.
Loved what I did and kind of ended my career where I would go into large scale software organizations and basically rip apart all of their processes from start to finish to help them do things better, faster, cheaper, really create efficiencies for the businesses. And so over the course of, my 20 years doing various things around there, went through a lot of different heavy programs and certifications all around, ways of improving how we're doing things.
Hmm.
I loved what I did, met my husband later in life, started a family later in life. And had one day when my daughter was about 2, I was still working full time, was kind of thinking about starting a business. And this woman very innocently asked me at the park, so what do you do for fun? As we were pushing our kids on the swings. And I was like, I had nothing. And I didn't even realize my life had gotten to that point where I couldn't tell someone what I did for
Mm-hmm.
fun. I would love to thank her, whoever she is. If she's out there, thank you for asking me that. Because it started me on a journey to really take a step back and go, what
Yeah,
happened? Like I didn't used
yeah,
to be this way. So the irony of it is, this is what I did for a living. I just never thought of myself as something that needed to be optimized and really streamlined. So
yeah.
I took all my training and applied it to how I was planning and managing all the things I had to juggle as, working, as building a business, as being a mom of a toddler, all of that. And over time, people started asking me, like, how are you doing this? You look so much happier. You look so different. And so, long story short, that kind of catapulted me into a place where I decided to leave my corporate life and go all in on really fine tuning this time management and planning framework for women. And so, I'm on a mission, as I like to say, to bring work life harmony into
Yeah.
homes all over.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such an important mindset shift because
Mhm.
I think for so long there was this conversation about work-life balance. And it's like if you're trying to do something extraordinary, there is no work-life balance.
Yeah.
It truly is work-life harmony and they flow into one another and it's all a part of your life, right? And it's finding how that's going to work optimally,
And you can't
so
make
that, yeah.
everything equal. I always
Yeah.
love thinking of the analogy. I used to watch my daughter in her gymnastics when she was little. She doesn't do it
Yeah.
anymore. But when they'd be walking across that balance beam,
Yeah.
trying to balance, and you'd listen to the coach saying all the things they had to think about, chin here, shoulders here, back here,
Yeah.
feet here, bottom here. I'm like, in order to stay balanced, literally every part of
Yeah.
your body had to be engaged and
Yeah.
on. And that's exactly what's happening when you're taking this approach of balancing everything that you have going on. It's
Yeah.
exhausting.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's such a good analogy. Okay, so let's start at the beginning,
Yeah.
right? So you're talking to an audience of very busy entrepreneurs that are in complete overwhelm.
Yes.
What is the first foundational thing that you would recommend for someone listening to the show today?
Now you're probably going to gasp when I say this, but hear me out, is to learn to break up with your daily task list.
Mm-hmm.
And for so many entrepreneurs or people who are juggling a lot, that's their lifeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell
Mm-hmm.
someone now there is something else, I promise,
Mm-hmm.
but the more connected you are to your daily task list, it is a recipe for burnout and disaster. And unfortunately, when you go look at a lot of, quote, productivity experts out there, it's exactly what they're teaching you to do. Wake up, do your brain dump. Don't forget to circle the top 3, which there's no science behind that. Just to let you know, I researched it for a long time. There is no science behind circling a top 3.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to magically just focus on those 3 first, and then you can do everything else. And most people are operating this way, and this keeps you in a perpetual state of overwhelm.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's so funny that you say that. I don't keep a to-do list. I don't keep a running task list, and I have my own reasons, but you're the expert here. So I want you to focus on the strategy that you teach. But philosophically, I totally agree. And it's been a complete game changer for me. So I'm tracking with you. Okay. So break up with the daily task list. I love it. What do you recommend that people do instead?
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to understand, like, why is your task list causing you overwhelm? Because you think, well, this is going to help me make sure I don't forget things and make sure I'm staying on track. But here's why it's keeping you stuck today. So when you wake up and do, quote, the brain dump, whether you realize it or not, when you're saying, what do I need to do today? You're actually putting limits, or like blinders, if you will, on your brain into today. So if you have one of those longer term projects, maybe you're like, oh, I want to write a book or something that is going to take months of work, right? When you're making your brain dump for today, your to-do list for the day, you're not going to be writing down, spend 30 minutes on your book, right? Because that's something that your brain's going, well, I can't write a book today. So it's not even going to go on the list. So you're preventing yourself typically from making progress on those long-term goals. But the brain science of what's happening as you're operating from your task list all day is what's really fascinating. I'm sure, especially if you're a very busy person, we've all been to that point where it's the end of the day and maybe your significant other is like, hey, let's go out to eat tonight. You're like, sounds great. And they go, where do you want to go? You're just like, for the love of God, please don't make me choose. Like, would you just make the decision, right? Because we've hit decisions. And your task list is actually causing the decision fatigue. So our brain is wired in such a way that if you are asking it to make a choice beyond anything than 2 things, it kind of goes into fight or flight mode. Like if I say, do you want an apple or an orange? Easy to choose. I hand you a basket with 17 fruits. All of a sudden your brain's like, oh my God, I don't know what to pick. So it's going to go for the easiest thing it can find. Well, the same thing's happening with your task list. If you have a list of 17 things for the day, now you go look at your list, say, what should I do first? Your brain's going to do one of 2 things. It either freezes, which is that, fight, or the flight, which means what it's going to do is go, what's the easiest thing I can get done here right now, just to get that dopamine hit? 9 times out of 10, it's not the most important thing.
It's like you write it down and you cross it off because you already did it and you want
exactly,
to win, right?
exactly. But then subtly, every time you look at that list all day long, you're making micro decisions. And the longer the list, the harder you've just pulled from your brain. So it might be 2:00, you're tapped out because you're at complete decision fatigue. And then what do? We go to bed feeling guilty because we didn't get all done. And then tomorrow we rewrite half of yesterday's list. Add a bunch more to it.
For sure. For sure. I couldn't agree more. And it's like you're keeping yourself down in like that tactical stuff, and it's just perpetuating the problem, right? Because then you're just living there. You're never actually doing anything that's creating solution. There's nothing that's creating permanency.
It's very
You're not
reactive.
moving forward. With the things that are actually important to you. So that's perfect. I totally agree. What then do you recommend as a step from there?
Yeah, so it's a subtle difference, but it's life-changing. And so I like to tell people a task list is not a plan. So what we ultimately want to shift to is, and I start everybody with learning how to create a weekly plan, not this daily operating way of living. And I think a great way to think about it is even just to think about money in the bank, right? So with a task list, if you have a list of 17 things, no one's taking the time to go, now let me think, how much will each one of these take? And like writing down the time next to it and then looking at the reality of how much is this, right? We're not doing that when we're in task list mode. But if we take a step back and say, okay, here's everything competing for my time this week. And we have a way to clearly see how much of my time is already spoken for things I've already committed to. Second to that, how much of my time is already spoken for in what I just call like busy time, especially if
Mhm.
you've got young kids. Like I'm
Yeah.
very busy from 5:30 to 8:30 in the morning, but nothing on a traditional to-do list is
Yeah.
getting done there. But those
Yeah.
3 hours are spoken for
Yeah.
every day, as is the post-school homework chaos, pre-dinner,
Yeah.
whatever. So
Yep.
when we're looking at a plan to say, okay, how much of my time's already spoken for this week? Now, how much do I really have left over? And now let's look at everything competing for my time, looking
Mhm.
at both what I call our recurring stuff, the things we're committed to doing every week, versus
Mhm.
those projects, those one-time projects that we're wanting to make progress on. And kind of similar to looking at your bank account. If you looked into your bank account and saw, oh, there's only $50 there and I need to go grocery shopping, you're going to be very strategic about what you put in that grocery cart.
Mhm.
Whereas if you were like, oh, I got all the money in the world, how you stroll through a grocery store is going to look very different. You're not going to be comparing prices. You're just going to be,
Yeah.
oh, the Doritos look great, throwing
Yeah.
them in, even though you don't need them.
Yeah.
And so when we learn how to do a step-by-step methodical planning process with our week, now, instead of looking at a list all day going, what am I doing next? You get to look at your plan and say, you tell me what I'm doing next.
Mhm.
You're just
Mhm.
following the path that you've built for yourself. And so
Yeah.
you don't have the decision fatigue. You're not getting overcommitted because you're constantly, instead of creating lists, we're actually putting the appointments on our calendar for the times that we are spending on specific things. So
Yeah.
we start to see real quick. Sometimes it's an ugly picture at first, just how little time we have.
Mhm.
But then on the flip side, we make so much better choices on how to
Yeah.
spend it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's how I manage my week.
Yeah.
Everything is theme days, recurring time blocks, specific blocks for specific things. And I live by it. And then that gives me the freedom to then put first the things that I want to have my, I call it like blackout periods, right? The like the 5:30 day or whatever, like, you know what I mean? Okay. So this
And
is
I love that
great.
you said freedom because people
Yeah.
hear that, this level of planning and they're like, oh, that's
Oh
so
no.
restrictive. And so I always have the sign like, no, it's actually super freeing because when I sit down
Yeah.
to binge some Netflix at night, because I know I want to do
Yeah.
that, it is guilt-free
Yeah.
as opposed to if I were operating the other way, you're feeling guilty. Oh, I should be doing this. I
Yeah.
don't ever feel like I should be doing anything because I've
Yeah.
built the structure and to allow that time
No,
down.
I totally agree. And that's been my experience as well. And I will say all of my freedom stems from the proper planning. And
Yeah.
then I think a lot of people go down the path of beginning to plan, but then they don't stick to it. They make the plan, but then the plan is not what they actually do. So then they're right back where they started. So I think just keeping those commitments to
Yeah.
yourself. Now,
And there's usually
okay.
two reasons why that will happen for people as well.
Hmm.
One is they don't know how to plan for what I call planning for uncertainty. So like you've
Yep.
got to know how much wiggle room you need to
Yep.
build into your plan. So if you're
100%.
booking every minute and all of a sudden the car breaks down Monday morning, you're gonna be like, see, planning's a waste of time. So you have to learn
Yeah.
how to do that the right way. And then second, you need to have a systematic process for your planning.
For
Otherwise,
sure.
it's like, you go clean out your whole closet and it looks beautiful. But if you don't have a system to maintain how it looks, it's a complete disaster 6 months later.
1000%. Now,
Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing a little bit about the process, but before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about how do you guide people through slashing the amount of things that they're even putting on their plan, putting on their to-do list? Because I personally feel that so many people, and I think entrepreneurs are super guilty of this. It's like if you looked at the amount of things that they do in a given week that are actually necessity to get a result, it's very few things. But then there's like 100 other things that, maybe they're doing out of habit or guilt or obligation or not getting the right help or whatever the case. So, do you have a process that you use with people or do you have a framework for helping them to actually eliminate things, get rid of things, stop committing
Yeah.
to things, like get rid, like clear it out? Because I feel like a lot of people listening to this show need to start like slashing things off the list.
Absolutely. And now this is one time where I do like a list.
Yeah.
And I like to call it your to don't list.
Yes.
And so I believe I always have a to don't list. It doesn't mean that everything on it you're going to stop doing today, because
Yeah.
sometimes you need to
Yeah.
create a plan for how it's going
Mm-hmm.
to get off your
Mm-hmm.
plate. But especially when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, we always need to start with prioritizing what we are doing. And it's going to be unique for every business, right? But I believe that there needs to be a couple things kind of written down next to each thing, which is this revenue generating? Right. And if there's
Yes.
another
Yes.
aspect of your business that's like another one to me that's really important is this supporting our current customers? Is this tied to customer satisfaction? Well, in a way that is revenue generating, right? Because a happy customer is going to refer somebody else. So you got to think outside the box a little bit because some people are like, oh, well, that, answering my customers' emails isn't revenue generating. Oh, but it is subtly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really understanding, does this generate revenue? Can I see a direct line to revenue or not? And then when you're looking at tasks for yourself, you have to ask yourself, when people have such a hard time outsourcing, if I'm not doing it, what does that free me up to do? If you make a list of the things that truly you're the only one that can do, the list is going to be very, very short. So then
totally agree.
what's on my to-don't list are all the things that I'm like, these are next up for me to figure out how I get them off my plate by either not doing them at all because they aren't generating revenue and nobody's going to do them, or what does it look like for me to outsource this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's like the most important part of this conversation because to your point, I think it's kind of like the accumulation of stuff in your house. It's like you start off, everything's perfect, it's clean, it's decluttered, everything's open, it's amazing. And then like your kids have a birthday. And then it's Christmas, and then it's this holiday, and this holiday, and then
it's the end of school, and they come back.
And all of a sudden, it's like closets are overfilling with stuff everywhere. Like my favorite thing to do is just fill trash bags and be like, just give it all away, give it all away. So I think that's kind of what happens to our lives, right? And so I think now, how often do you recommend that people make the to-don't list?
Well, it's something I always keep. So I look at mine every week, right? To just be like, but then I do a full time audit for myself every quarter.
That's
where
what
for
I
an
do too.
entire 2-week period, I write down, and it's all in
Every
our
single
project
thing.
management thing. So I can really see everything I'm doing. And it still surprises me every quarter how I've let stuff, because it's quote, just easier. Or we started off going, I don't know if I'm going to want to do this or not. Let me give it a test drive. And then 6 months later, you're still the person doing it when it doesn't need to be you anymore.
For sure.
So
And I feel like
take a
that's what
deep
happens a
dive.
lot with entrepreneurs is like they know they shouldn't be doing it, but they don't want to slow down enough to go through the process of finding the person and getting the right system in place and getting the training in place to get off their plate. But it's one of those things where you have to slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not even like that slow. Because one of the things that came up on mine recently, as silly as it is just paying out our affiliates every month. And I've always done it. That was one that came up. I'm like, okay, there is a way with our financial thing for me to do this without opening up, more than I wanted to.
Yep.
So the easiest way to offboard it is when I sit down to do that on Friday this week, Loom will be on and I'll be talking to myself and screen recording the whole thing.
Yeah.
Then it's sitting there. And now the person that we are going to pass it off to, I'm not going to waste my time writing detailed documentation. She will have the video. And as she's watching it and learning it, she's prettying up the SOP for this. Come back, ask me questions if there's any questions that need to be asked once. And now the whole process is documented. And if she doesn't want to do it and it's someone else, it's ready to be passed off to whoever needs.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's so simple. It's so simple. So I think that's a really, really powerful reminder for everyone. And I think that a lot of times people don't even go down that path because they think like, I can't do it. I can't offload it right now, or I can't stop it right now. But I think the important piece of what you said there was, it doesn't need to be something that you are stopping today, but you're separating it out and you're putting it on that list and you're saying, I'm going to get a plan to get this off my plate. If I can't stop it in this moment, I'm going to figure out how and what that plan is going to look like. Because if you never do that, it just self-perpetuates.
Yeah. And then you're never going to have time for that strategic, true CEO stuff. And so for me, I know and I have my COO do the same thing. So once a quarter, if we're getting to the point where we're seeing collectively, we're at over 10 hours a week of stuff that neither one of us want to do. Now I know it's time for us to start looking for another person to bring on the team. We already know we have a minimum of 10 hours of stuff that we can get off our plates together.
For sure. I love that. Okay. Well, before we wrap up, and then obviously I want to tell people where they can go to actually learn your entire system, the whole framework, implement the system in their business. Are there any other top tips or mindset shifts that you think people should be thinking about that are in a state of overwhelm right now? They want to kick it to the curb. They want to get back on top of their business and their life to create that work-life harmony. Anything else that you would give as like immediate tips or mindset shifts, and then we'll talk about where they can go to get more.
Yeah, I think a big thing, and a lot of women sometimes get wrapped up in this as well, is understanding, unfortunately, right now, our culture really celebrates the very traditional thoughts of what productivity is, right? Which is how many things did you check off your list today? Which is why I always like to share a different definition of productivity, which is getting the most important things done in a stress-free way.
Yeah.
It is so important to understand that our worth is not measured by the traditional view of productivity, right? So as a business owner, especially if you are juggling, a full family life and personal life and all of that, your ultimate goal needs to be going to bed at night, feeling a sense of accomplishment. And usually that comes with the one thing, right? Not the 17 small things.
So true. So true. So good. Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. So for people that are sitting here today that want to kind of learn more about the full system that you teach and how to implement the whole thing and just kind of clean it up, where is a good place for them to go next?
So if you want to just kind of see a little bit of it in action before you're like, I don't know, I've got an app out in the App Store. It's just called the Pink Bee. It's in both Google Play and the App Store. And you can unlock all the content in it for like $4.99. And I actually do a basic weekly planning review in there. So you can kind of give you a couple steps to help you get started today. So that kind of initially to go, let's get out of overwhelm. And then if you're interested in learning more about the entire, what I call TOP program, which is time management, organization, and planning, you can just go to thetopprogram.com as well.
Amazing. So much value because it's really what gives you back control of life, right? It's about regaining control of your life, and it is about achieving freedom. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that they think more planning and more structure takes away from their freedom, and they don't realize that is what creates freedom because it gives you back your power to achieve the things that matter in a stress-free way. That's what you said, right? And that's exactly it. So I think this is just such important work that you're doing. Thank you so much for everything that you shared today. And for everyone listening and watching, all the details of everything we just shared, the links, the app, and next steps are in the show notes down below. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
All right. And to everybody watching, thanks for being here, and we'll see you back here next week.